Welcome to Unlock Your Retirement with our host, Bruce Smith. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore. Bruce, I'm excited about today's show. You and I got to see each other at a big financial conference. I'm excited about that. We can talk about that. What else have you been up to?
Oh man, it's just crazy. We're opening our new office in Florida, and that has been just one hassle after another. But we're about a week away from the grand opening. I hope no other major challenges. Um, so Mrs. Smith is having a few health issues.
Oh,
She had,
sorry to
she
hear
had
that.
so she did what all of us great retirees do. She got the shots for shingles, and damned if she didn't come down with it. So it's not fun. Yeah. So actually, at the meeting, that's when she started to have the symptoms and have problems. So yeah. But
Wow,
no,
did she got shingles from the shot?
no, she had both shots, and so the day we got out there to the meeting when you and I were together, she
Uh-huh.
had like a few bumps on the side of her nose. She said, "What do you think it is?" I said, "It looks like the shingles." Oh, it can't be the shingles. I got the shots, 2 shots, and I got the same ones. And so then, of course, you go to the doctor, and we got back, and they're like, "Yeah, it's shingles, and it's everywhere. It's in her mouth, in her ears, her nose.
Oh,
And they're
no.
worried about her eye, and we got to go see an ophthalmologist." But the fun of being retired. I'm not retired, but I'm that age. But
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
and they're like, well, it's just not going to be as bad as it would have been if you hadn't gotten the vaccine. Really?
That's not why we
Yeah.
get the vaccine.
Yeah, I know. So
We get the vaccine so we don't get the shingles,
yeah.
right?
But 40 years of doing this, I said, we've seen about everything, and I know a number of clients have been through it. It's incredibly painful.
Yeah.
I actually talked to a client this morning, and they said, oh yeah, my dad had it, and he lost his hearing for a while in that ear, but it came back. And I'm like, oh, don't say that in front of Mrs. Smith. So
Oh, yeah, no. Well, I'm
yeah,
so sorry to hear that because I've talked to people who've had it, and that is not a good thing.
she wouldn't have to listen to my crap. So there is kind of
Well,
an upside.
yeah, there's an upside for
Yeah,
her to
she
losing
can
her
go
hearing if
out.
that happened. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but she's good. She's in the recovery mode. We're in good shape. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think you would probably, Bruce, get in trouble less if she couldn't hear some of the things you said.
If my lips are moving, it's something stupid. That's let's
That's
just
not
let's just
true.
go with the visual impact. He's talking, something stupid's coming out.
Well, unless you're talking about finances, then that's you've got the when you talk, people listen, but that's for financial advice strategies.
Yeah.
But when we get off those topics, Bruce, we do worry about you. You know that.
Well, people come in. We get we deal with lots of husbands and wives. We love our couples,
Sure.
and whenever because you typically, because of how wide our planning is, we cover a multitude of territory, and
Yep.
we'll talk about things, and he'll look at her or she'll look at him, and they're like, "Well, why are we doing that?" And they start, and I say, "We have at WealthKare, we have many professional licenses, but one of them is not marriage counseling." You
Right.
know?
I bet
And
you feel like but you do end up doing that somewhat because you gotta get that communication out in the open. Everybody needs
yeah,
to be on the same page. We were at that financial conference with 500 of the nation's some of the nation's top advisors, and I've had many of them tell me I feel like a counselor sometimes to
oh, yeah. I
some
mean,
of
we
the
are,
people I work with.
it's
Yeah.
and then I was there for the extra, the elite guys at the
Yeah.
beginning, the small group,
Yeah.
and, and it's amazing that, it's just it's a great calling. My sister is she does, mental health with people, which I
Mhm.
don't know how she does that. It would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm crazy, but we all have our talents, and, really, this has just always been like you say, if you love what you do, and we do at WealthCare, the entire team does, um, you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, and I don't think it's any more prominent than in the financial services industry. We love working with people. We love introducing people to new concepts, new ideas, and really educating them on what's possible, not just, getting the job done as far as selling a product. We don't do that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's important, and you've got a great show lined up for us today, Bruce. We're going to be talking about quite a bit. What's the show topic for today?
so, we're going to talk about the hidden gaps in traditional retirement planning. And we say traditional retirement planning. Unfortunately, as we always say on the show, there's 300,000 advisors you could call on across this great country of ours and say, "Hey, I need some advice. I need some help. I'm looking for a wealth manager," whatever it might be. And the industry approach is, and you know this better than anybody, is you find a hot button and you massage it. And so you become very monoscopic, just looking at one thing and solving that problem, whether it be risk or taxes or income or legacy planning. And they don't realize that to really get the most out of your retirement, it's all four of those have to be part of the plan, and they compound and help grow each other and protect each other. So we're going to talk about the gaps in retirement planning, because you've saved money, you've done what you were told, maybe you still feel a little uneasy, or you ask yourself, "Am I getting all I can get?" And we're going to talk about why that feeling might be more common than most people realize and what you can do about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, yeah, you make a great point there. And the traditional, typical retirement planning, there's a lot of rules of thumb, and I imagine there are quite a few gaps that people come across, right?
Oh yeah, I mean the industry is, unfortunately, I spent my first 10 years in this business. This is year 40. I don't know where that came from, but the first quarter of my career, I was in the brokerage business, and I went from being a broker all the way to vice chairman of the company in Boston. And I can tell you, in 10 years, I learned one thing: Wall Street, the insurance industry, the financial industry, they're about selling products to people. You've got a problem, we've got a pill. Buy this product, all your ills will be taken care of. And that was, I just always felt like an itch, like that's not enough. That's not enough. And when I was vice chairman of the Investors Capital in Boston, I worked with wealthy people, and I found out real fast that they expect, and they demand a truly comprehensive plan. It's like, look, if you're my wealth manager, if you're my elite advisor, I need you to do what you can do to minimize my risk, still give me good returns. I want you to reduce my taxes or eliminate them where possible. And this is what's allowed by the tax code. Nothing crazy. Income, not only do I want to receive an income, I want an increasing income because things are going to cost more. And most of all, I worked hard for this money. I want as much, preferably 100% of it, to go to my kids and none of it to Uncle Sam. What can we do to minimize anything going to that terrible beneficiary that's not on your paperwork, known as Uncle Sam? So,
Yeah, Uncle
yeah.
Sam. Yeah, he's a lot of those retirement accounts are joint accounts with Uncle Sam, and you just don't realize it. But you always say, this is something you bring up, and I've heard you say before, but I'm curious as to why you say saving success doesn't necessarily equal retirement success in many cases. And I think a lot of our listeners might think, well, I've done a good job saving. I put money into my 401k, my IRA. I've got money saved up. I've got that big 401k I've saved, for 40 years of work or 35 years of work. I should be fine in retirement. But that doesn't always, saving success doesn't necessarily mean a successful retirement, does it?
No, because it's, we call it, accumulation discipline. People are the people that have done a good job, and the person I fault most for this is Fidelity. For so long, Fidelity, every year they would do a survey and they would put a number out there. If you have this much saved for retirement, you're going to be good. And the number would escalate every couple of years, or at least every year in most cases. And that's probably one of the prominent questions we get from pre-retirees is, how much do I need to have saved for retirement to be successful in retirement?
What's the
And
secret number? What's the magic number?
they want an answer that's like that, just an
Yeah,
instant answer that's going to be right and make it happen.
magic. Yeah.
And when they ask me that, I say it's easy, $100 million. And they go, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Well," I said, if you want, no matter what comes down the pike, long-term care, I've got an itch, I need a new Ferrari, I want a house in the Bahamas, whatever, $100 million will probably get you there. Now, you probably don't have $100 million. The interesting part is you can have two retirees, like the guy that did saving success. So maybe he did very well and he's got $2 million. And you have a person who did their best, but they have $1 million. And I just saw this survey recently, and I was absolutely blown away by it. It was an inventory of the people over 55. What percentage of them have $1 million of net worth? And it's a huge number. It's amazing, you know. Now, a lot of times it's in your house, but yeah, it's so those people. The guy that has $1 million may, in fact, have a more beneficial, a more financially successful retirement than the guy that had $2 million. Why? Because he's efficient with it. You know, he's looking to get the maximum value for the money he has. So he's not looking just at returns. He's basically saying, you know, can I keep more of my money with less taxes? Can I escalate my income, but how do I do it tax efficiently? How do I do it risk efficiently? How do I maximize what goes to my family? So, you know, again, that elite wealth level of planning compared to traditional planning is all about efficiency. It's about maximizing what you can get for the money you have, and most people don't have that or even have access to it.
Right. And that's where you come in and what you do to help the people you work with, because going from your working years in that accumulation phase, as you call it, into your retirement years, it's a 180. It's a complete, you have to, your mindset has to change. The way you think about your money has to change. And that's why you need to go in having a plan, because it really, I mean, retirement changes the rules.
Oh yeah, you know, and here, you know, here's a great analogy. This happened to me this week, and boy, it's funny how you can feel so helpless in this situation. But so I found something on Facebook Marketplace that I wanted to buy. Wow, there's a
Sure.
surprise, right? So Monica goes with me, and we pull into this property, and it was a condo, basically a townhouse and a condo, and I'm trying to find this townhouse number. So I'm walking around, and I got door numbers that are closed, property numbers that are closed, and I can't find this one location. I'm like, where
Hmm.
is it? You know, and so I see this wonderful lady and her two young children, and I said, I'm looking for 2018, and she goes, no habla, and I said, 2018, you know, and she's like, no habla, and I'm like, wow, I'm this close. I know it's here. It's very close to me, but I can't communicate. I'm not able to facilitate what needs to be done. And finally, I walked around the other side of the building and I found it. But it was an interesting journey to be lost. And you can be lost in retirement. You know, you can be a diligent accumulator and build that wealth. And when you hit retirement, you know, if you're going to try to play by that same rule, you're going to find yourself many cases coming up short, and not coming up short a year or two after you retire. You're going to start coming up short and wondering what went wrong at the 5 year point or 10 year point in retirement. When you're older, you're not able to work or don't want to work. You don't want to be the Walmart greeter. You don't want to work at Lowe's, you know, and that's the name of the game. So there are two different animals. So saving success is not retirement success. Retirement success comes from saying, okay, I'm here. Here's what I have, and how do I get the most value out of it? And we talk with people. We have a lot of people that are do-it-yourselfers that become clients of ours, and the reason being, it's like, you know, yeah, I felt like I was doing okay at Fidelity with my investments, but Bruce, I never even knew how to do any of this tax stuff that you guys do. I didn't know how to find that stable income, that increasing income using a guardrail system like you got. You guys have tools that are valuable to me in that retirement success goal.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for people to understand that you've got to have somebody who's going to look at all the possible tools in the toolbox as far as financial planning is concerned, and make sure that they're looking out for your best interests. And Bruce, as a fiduciary, as a financial services professional, that's what you've been doing. And I know you've been doing this and working in finance for 40 years now. So again, you must have started when you were 10, because you don't
Thank you
look a
very much.
day over 50. Yep, yep.
Send a
Uh,
PayPal to Tony for $100.
yeah, yeah, I'll send you the code so you can just PayPal me for that. But seriously, I think this is so important, and it's really, people have to understand that, just, you know, my grandfather's and even my parents' retirement plan isn't going to work for me now, right?
No,
I mean, it's not our grandparents' retirement plan. Uh, there are so many gaps in that traditional old way of doing things, And you hear the same things over and over. And Bruce, when we do these shows, what I hear you saying is you talk about a lot of different strategies and ways to do things that aren't the typical things I've heard over and over.
Well, it's funny. We actually got an email from a listener, 2 weeks ago,
Oh,
and it was kinda interesting. So he went to
complaining about me, how I don't contribute enough to the show, probably.
well, we have a response, ladies and gentlemen. And but it was interesting. It's like, he said, "I don't think that I" let me see if the way he's worded it was very interesting. He says, "I don't think I have the acumen to work with an advisor of your level."
Oh,
And I was like, "Wow, really?" So I sent him an email and I said, "Hey," I said, Give me your phone number, please. Let me call you. I want to talk to you." And the guy did. And I called him up and I said, I said, "I was kind of surprised by your email, but," I said, why do you say that?" And he said, "Well,"
yeah.
he said, "You talk about a lot of things that I know I'm not doing." And he said, "But," he said, my head just hurts thinking about that. And he says, "I would just embarrass myself if I came in to see you." And I said, "Well, let me ask you," I said, "You listen to the show." I said, "Does the show make sense to you?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, yeah." I said, "I think you have a lot of great ideas." And I said, "Well," I said, "here's the thing." I said, "When you come in and see us," I said, "we speak your language. We're
Right.
not going to use complex financial terms. We're not going to try to wow you with our knowledge." I said, "The fact is, I mean, if, I've had a number of people that have said, and I think you know this, you've heard people say it, is, one of my unique skills that I've acquired in my life is I make the complex simple. I'm great at easy analogies.
That's why you're good at what you do, because you're
Yeah,
able to take all these moving parts and say, "Hey, for you, here's what fits, here's why, here's what the math says." I mean,
yeah,
that's really valuable, and again, that's one way that you help fill the gaps.
yeah. I mean, and that's communication is the key, and that is a huge problem. Is that too many people hire a financial advisor, an expert, if you will, and that person, wows them with vast amounts of knowledge. Now, because they want to know that the advisor is trying to portray that they have value, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if the client can't understand it, I can tell you right now, wealthy people, you try any financial gibberish and they'll show you the door instantly.
Yeah,
It's very simple how they do their money. That's why I wrote, create wealth, retain wealth. It's basically here's how simple money management can be, and here's how the wealthy do it. And it's the book that is kind of following what we do. All the people that we meet with get a copy of the book. So when you leave that meeting and you go home, if you have a question about something, I can say, well, go to chapter 4. We do this, but communication is the key. And it starts with a phone call. It's
yeah.
very simple. Pick up the phone, 888-888-5601. Every time I say that, I see a smile on your face, but easy numbers, 888-888-5601. And we're going to have that 20-minute, schedule your 20-minute complimentary discovery call. You're going to get no sales pitches, no complex terms. But if you come in to meet with us, it's gonna be that same thing, or if we have a Zoom meeting, it's gonna be the same kind of conversation. You kinda get to see what you see is what you get with the show. Or you can go right now and schedule an appointment, go to discoverunlock.com, and you can actually click right there and schedule a time with me. I'd love a chance to talk with you, and it's gonna be a talk just like this. I don't instantly transform into some PhD that's complicated. I'm great at physics and chemistry and math, but that's not what we're gonna talk about.
Right. Yeah, and I think the communication is another gap, and I'm glad you brought that up because communication is key. And that's why, if you're married, both spouses need to be involved in the financial and retirement plan. You all need to be on the same page. And the way to get there is to work with somebody like yourself and your team there at WealthKare. It's just so important, and there are aspects to retirement planning that you don't want to fall through those gaps and cracks. It's, we use, talk about sequencing and income and where is it going to come from and when. You started off by talking about, hey, there's, a lot of people say you need this amount to retire, or the average person needs this amount. Well, what's average mean? Right. I mean, there's a danger in planning out your retirement just based on averages, isn't there?
Oh yeah, I think the greatest talk I ever heard about averages, especially regarding finances, the guy said, "Okay," he said, and he picked on me. He said, "You, how tall are you?" I said, 6'1". He said, "Okay." He said, "I'm going to have you walk across a river that has an average depth of 3.5 feet." He says, "Can you do that?" And I went, "Yeah, I can do that." He said, "Okay." So when you get in the water, you find out that I was an idiot. It's only 2 feet deep. He said, and you walk across the river and you get out to the middle, but out in the middle, it's 14 feet deep. And you're way underwater. The water is 6 feet above your head, 7 feet above your head. Now, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm going to swim. He said, what if you don't know how to swim? I'm like, okay. And he said, I said, I didn't lie to you. It was an average of 3 feet. He said, but that's like the markets. They show you an average return. The average return is not what you're going to get because past performance is never an indicator of future results.
Right.
And I will say, I have seen a change in the temperature of people we've been talking to in the last 6 months. For a long time, the market's done fairly well. They've done
Yeah.
fairly well, but now we're starting to see cracks in that security blanket. In that they're like, hey, we need to kind of revisit risk because I've done well, and I love where my portfolio is, but I'm really worried about it taking a hard left turn. And I said, no, I think that makes sense. So we're not going to sit here and sit on past accolades and say how great it is. And when they go to their advisor is like, "Oh no, you're doing fine. Look at the return you got." And people are it's if you feel it at all uncertain or unsure or uncomfortable about where you're at in the risk category of things, even though your portfolio may be doing well, you need to have a conversation with somebody who understands. And that's the name of the game. Is that our wealth protection and wealth preservation strategies that we utilize in every portfolio that we build, give people that sleep insurance, if you will.
Yeah.
They're very comfortable saying, hey, I know now that if the market tanks, here's where I'm at. And I wasn't there before I dealt with Bruce and his team. So and we've been doing it that way for 40 years. I tell the story, poor Chris, I'm going to throw Chris under the bus.
Oh boy, here we go.
So Chris came to us. Chris has been coming around my house since fourth grade, and that's one thing people love about our firm is my son's been there 20 years and it was his choice. I told him do anything but this, but Bruce the fourth, he came there. Little Bruce the fifth is growing just so fast. My God, that boy. And he's on a roll and doing well in school. But
Awesome.
but Chris has been coming around my house since fourth grade. He's Bruce's best friend growing up, and he went to work for a wirehouse, and he came to work for us, and he's like, "You guys don't get it. You're not. You need to be more aggressive with your clients' portfolios," because he wanted us to do it the way they did at the wirehouse. And I said,
Sure.
"No, here's how we do it." And he thought I was stupid. I mean, he's kind of like, the old guy doesn't get it. He's too conservative. Then the market tanked.
Mm.
And he was calling his friends at the firm to be named, the brokerage house, and these guys, he said they were taking extended lunches, they weren't calling clients back, because the world was coming apart and people were losing their butt. And the calls that were coming into our office, he's fielding these calls, as is Bruce and myself. And he said the number one call was, "So that 40% you said was wealth protection, I didn't lose any, you didn't lose a dime." "But I made good money last year." "Yeah, you did, but now the market's turned. You didn't lose anything." "Well, what about this?" "No, you didn't lose money there." Or, "No, that one market went down 25%, you lost 3." And they're like, "But I did so well when the market was up." And he said, "All of a sudden, I got smarter." So, and it's because it is a different approach. So, on the risk side of things, there's a lot of wonderful, unique things we can do, and that universe has gotten so much better. The number one thing I get, and I talk to people all over the country now, because we are doing business all around the country, and people, I explain to them our wealth preservation or wealth protection assets that we build into the portfolios, and they're like, "Never heard of that one. Didn't even know that existed," because they're used to the same Fidelity Vanguard line. So
Sure.
if you're looking to expand what you're doing, pick up the phone and give us a call at 888-888-5601 or go to discoverunlock.com. That's where it
All
starts.
right. That's awesome. And it's Discover Unlock. com. And we're going to take a quick break and be right back with more of Unlock Your Retirement with our host, Bruce Smith. And you are listening to Unlock Your Retirement. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore. I'm here with our host, Bruce Smith. Bruce, been a great conversation today. You're talking about uncovering some of these hidden gaps in traditional retirement planning. Don't get caught up by laws of averages or the magic number that you need to successfully retire. Get a plan in place that's specific for you. You talked about a lot of these different aspects. What's next? What do you want to talk about next? I mean, I know one thing you had mentioned. I think some people confuse growth with safety. And you said something funny in the first segment. You said, how much do I really need to have in my bank account to truly be safe from everything in retirement? And you said the amount is, if you want a magic number, it's $100 million. And since that's not realistic for most of us, you and I do know people that are there, but the majority of us are not going to get there, and not even close. So what do we need to know? Growth doesn't equal safety. Again, an amount doesn't equal a successful retirement, right?
Yeah, and if you see Tony and me kind of yucking it up a little bit, and I got to tell you, I mean, that's I have one of my favorite teachers in the high school. I ran into her 20 years after I graduated at an Oktoberfest, and it was very awkward because I went up to her and I had my wife and my son Vaughn, and I went up and I introduced them, and I'm like, hey, this is my wife Monica, and who puts up with me, and my son Vaughn. And she looked me dead in the eye. She goes, still providing comic relief for the world? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I am, and I thought, oh my God, after all these years, she's still gonna hack on me, But you say about what's the magic number. I had a client, a prospect, they came in as a prospect, they're a client now. But we just really hit it off well, and they were kind of jocular and funny, and we had a lot of good exchanges. So a follow-up to the meeting they sent me the email and they asked the magic question. So realistically, Bruce, how much do we need to feel secure in retirement? And I got the YouTube clip of Dr. Evil, 100 bazillion dollars, and I got a big thumbs up and a big smiley face. So that was pretty good.
That's awesome.
I mean, I think the one that really gets people, and this is something that manifests itself. If you think about it, we kind of hit our stride of serious income earning in our mid-20s. You're kind of grounded. Now you're making a decent salary or whatever, and then it grows up from there, and you're contributing and you're saving money, doing everything right. But the whole time it has been tax deferral, and people, they're like, okay, and there are there's a percentage, probably 5 to 10% of the people we meet with, they actually think it's tax-free. They think tax deferral meant tax-free. No, this means now you've got an accumulated tax bill.
Right.
But we introduced the concept of, what does that lifetime tax cost look like? Whether you pay it, your surviving spouse pays it, whether your kids pay it, what does that tax bill look like? You were told to do it, but nobody ever put a price tag on it. And when we put that price tag on it and say, here's what it looks like if you live to 90 and you go through all the ramifications of what the government says and take the income you need and do all these things, here's what that price tag looks like for you, for your spouse, and for your kids. And you get the huge eyes, and they're kind of like, wait a second, that's a big number. I worked hard for this money. I saved this money. I said, yeah, but you signed a deal with Uncle Sam when you filled out that IRA application or that 401 application. And they're like, okay. I said, now let me show you what we can do about it. And I say, and on average, for people that have saved $1 million or more for their retirement, and that's become a lot of people, 10 years ago, that seemed like a huge number. Nowadays, it's very commonplace, I can tell you. On average, over their lifetime, our tax projections with our tactical strategies is we can reduce that tax bill by 30 to 40%. And that's several $100,000 over their lifetime. And, in retirement, having that successful retirement we talked about, every extra $100,000 helps.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Obviously, it makes a big difference. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's so when somebody says, an advisor is trying to illustrate they're different, and let's be honest, we lay the cards on the table. We don't sugarcoat it. Every advisor out there is saying, I'm different. They're all
Right.
trying to set themselves apart from, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different. It's just like a broken record,
Yeah.
and it's like, I'm not going to tell you we're different. I'm going to show you what our planning looks like. Here's the before and after. You be the judge. You
Yeah.
tell me if it's different, and the people are like, I had no idea.
Mhm.
And the one thing which I have to give Chris credit, since I threw him under the bus, I got to give him credit. We have whittled our planning down. We used to give people 3-ring binders this thick with all the tabs and all the reports and all the everything. You know, Now when we bring back a plan to somebody, it's one sheet of paper, maybe two, depending on their strategy. But basically, we can sum it all up. Here's the risk. Here's what changed in the risk game. Here's what changed in the tax game. Here's what changed in the income game. Here's what changed in the legacy game. And I will be fair and say, because me, I'm an analytical, and it's like, nope, we're doing a 3-ring binder. Chris is like, nope, we're going to do it this way. And it's like, okay, we'll try it your way. It has been so amazingly well received. Um, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have chosen it, but I can tell you that the clients love it. They've
Yeah.
chosen it. Basically they've proven me wrong. And that's, I'm always willing to learn. I'm an eternal student, but that's the simplicity. Why does it make sense to have a plan done? And, am I going to understand it? If it comes down to 2 pages and it makes sense and you can evaluate it that way, we're all about keeping it easy. So not only is the communication simple, but
Sure.
understanding the material is simple.
So the difference is, I mean, because we're talking about it's the same financial industry, a lot of times the same credentials, but you can get wildly different results. And that's what you're saying. But why is that? Well, you're simplifying it. And I think that a lot of so-called financial planners or professionals are just focused on the accumulation phase and side of things versus where you obviously work on growth. That's an important, compounding interest, eighth wonder of the world, but you're also looking at more than just growth.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's Ben Franklin said, a penny saved is a penny earned.
Yep.
And, growing up, we all figured that was the piggy bank.
Yep.
Every penny I can put in the piggy bank is a penny earned. And, for many years, that's how I interpreted it. The greatest opportunity in retirement and in retirement planning is to apply what Ben said in a much different avenue, in that, you know, I can go over here in my portfolio and I can try to make an extra $100,000 from growth. Okay. And typically you're going to take more risk to get that additional growth. Okay. Now, my question is very simple. If I could reduce your income taxes by $100,000, how is that any different than trying to make the 100,000 over here? Well, $100,000 is $100,000, but I didn't take additional risk. I was more efficient and more managerial in how we approached the design of the plan. And so a penny saved, in this case, tax savings, is the same as the penny earned, or the $100,000. $100,000 saved is the same as $100,000 earned. And that is diametrically different than what most advisors do.
Yeah.
You brought up a really interesting point, is that, you said about, people don't see this kind of planning. And actually a lot of this came out of the meeting that we both attended, the elite section they had at the beginning, which is a much smaller number of advisors. And I'm proud to be in that group. And, I came away from there asking a really simple question, which was, you know, the level of planning and the power that's in that room, and how these guys do this and how they get more for their clients. And that's the focus of being an elite advisor, is what the results to the client, not how wealthy the advisor becomes. And the interesting part was, you know, how does the average person find an elite advisor? And
Right.
interestingly, 99% of the people in that room, and you heard that, how do they get them? Referrals. So
Yeah.
unless
It's
you
almost
know
all
somebody,
referrals. Yeah.
if you don't unless you know somebody that has that advisor, and refers them to you, you're not gonna see them at a seminar, you're not gonna get a free chicken dinner from them, you're not gonna hear them on the radio, and in some cases you will, but in most cases you won't. So it's
Right.
hard to find that level.
It's true.
I'm stubborn. Chris and Bruce are kinda like, "Why do you still do radio?" I'm like, "'Cause I've done radio for 22 years and I like doing it, and I
Yeah.
like Tony, so it it's yeah, it's fun. I mean, what am I gonna do? Plop my butt in a chair and grow old? I don't wanna do that. So, that's that because I always say elite wealth management begins where traditional wealth management stops. Traditional retirement planning, getting all of that, and then you really kinda hit the turbo and really make it happen.
Yeah. Well, that's huge because again, there's so many moving parts. You talked about the tax implications. You talked about again the just addressing the fear of not running out of money in retirement. How am I going to do that? You have to address all of these things. And I'm just afraid, a lot of advisors will say, oh, we're holistic. But when it comes down to it, they're not. And they're not putting it in terms you can understand. And they talk a big talk, but are they actually helping you accomplish these things? And you've been doing this so long and helped so many people accomplish a successful retirement by having a plan. Yeah. I mean, it's just that's really huge. A simple plan is so important. A plan that you're going to understand, but yet it addresses all the moving parts at the same time. And that's not an easy balance.
No, I mean, the industry, whether you deal with a broker, whether you deal with Fidelity, Vanguard, whatever, or an insurance agent, what you're gonna hear from them is product knowledge.
Yep.
We have this product that you need that's gonna solve your things, and here's all the bells and whistles of what it does. Whereas, we're actually engineering and planning architecture. We're building that framework to look at all of these pieces, and product selection comes last. It's like, well, we find something that fits what we're doing. When you build a house, you're going to have the framework, you're going to have the foundation, you're going to have the concrete, you're going to have all of that, the trusses, and all. Then you're going to pick your shingles and your windows and that kind of stuff. If somebody came in and said, "These are the best windows for your house. These are the greatest shingles. Here's the tile for your floor," and if you put up, matchsticks for walls, it's not going to stand.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the difference, is planning is when somebody says holistic, it's very simple. In your mind, just remember four words, risk, taxes, income, legacy. Did they cover all four of those? And do I understand where there's value being created? And if not, another question we keep getting, okay, if you're a top 1% advisor, how much do your services cost? You've got to be costing me an arm, a leg, and 3 feet. And I say, here's the craziest part is, believe it or not, elite wealth management in many cases costs the same or less than you're currently paying an advisor. And that one blows people away. They think they're going to pay 2, 3, 4 times as much for that level of planning, service, and value, and they're not. In our cases, I mean, our standard fee is 1%. Now, but we also have programs and products we utilize that reduce that down to where our average out of pocket for the client is about 0.6% from their portfolio. So if they're paying somebody 1% for a risk-based portfolio pie design and nothing else, they could probably save 30% on fees and get everything. So that's the scale of things. So it's more cost effective. It's more opportunity for value at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And I think that again, a lot of it, what you're talking about, focuses on income sustainability and how are you going to achieve that, and then the rest, everything else you mentioned, like everything from tax planning to inflation, planning for inflation. It's all about creating income sustainability, isn't it? That's the main question you have to be asking. Do I have enough to sustain an income throughout my retirement? How flexible is it if I spend more this year and less next year? I mean, there are a lot of those variables that come into play that you help people with, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, we used to use the term results in advance. It's like, you can wait till something happens and you can react to it. So in the case of the market drops 40%. That's when people will always beat a path to our door. I heard you on the radio. You guys are conservative. Hey, I have 600,000 left out of my $1 million portfolio. Can you help me? I really would love to have helped you, and it was $1 million, so it wouldn't be 600,000 today. So if
Right.
we
Could have saved
so
you that
so
$400,000, but
so if
yes.
we institute wealth protection, wealth preservation for portfolio design, you wouldn't be in that problem. So in advance of the market decline, let's fix that. On the income side, look, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I can tell you right now, you know, every retiree, it hits a point where they almost come to you, you know, "Please, sir, may I have another?" They need
Yeah.
to increase their income, and they're timid about it. It's their money, it's their lifestyle. Don't
Right.
sacrifice your lifestyle. So we went to what we call the guardrail system for income, is that we're planning for a pay raise every 2 years for our clients, because instead of them having to come and be timid and ask permission to increase their income from their own wealth accumulation, why don't we get ahead of that and say, look, there's going to be inflation, there's going to be additional needs, but more importantly, and I'm going to be a little, it's going to be a little hard saying this, I would rather put money in somebody's pocket that they hadn't planned for to go do something with their life while they can, while they're physically
Yes.
able, while they're mentally able, before unforeseen craziness happens in their retirement life. And that's personal. I mean, I've seen it too damn many times that people accumulate money, they have this bunch of money, and they always say, wealth cannot buy you health, and it's so important. So, they really love when we sit down and say, okay, we're going to do this. And they'll push back. No, I don't want an income. I don't want to increase my income. I say, no, I want you. And a lot of times, I mean, we're men. I'll look to the wife and I'll say, hey,
Oh, yeah.
for an extra $2,400 this year, an extra $5,000 this year, what can you do with? Tell me what you're going to do with that. Well, you know what? We're going on a cruise. Hey, you know what? I need new shoes and a handbag. Whatever,
Sure. Yeah.
And but that's why you did this. Why did you save this money? We are so, this is not something that is taught in a course or in a book. This is looking at people and looking them in the eye and talking to them for 40 years and seeing where the bumps in the road are and saying, here's how we fix that. We're human just like you. We're getting older just like you. My poor wife experienced shingles for the first time. Well, this is not a great thing, but it's part of the aging process. And we want you to live your best life. And that's the name of the game. That's what unlocking your retirement's all about. But it starts with the conversation. If you've been listening for a long time, you go, I keep saying, I'm going to call those guys. Now's the time. Let's do it now while the markets are up, while the good things are happening, while taxes are low. 888-888-5601, Tony's favorite number of all the things he does.
The
And
888 number.
and discoverunlock.com. Discover what you can do to unlock your retirement and maximize your benefits.
Yeah,
That's
and
it.
that's huge, Bruce. And I know you love hearing from our listeners out there. You talked about a listener you heard from earlier, so I encourage everybody, pick up the phone, give Bruce and his team a call there at WealthKare. Now, Bruce, we got about 10 minutes left in the show, and I think it is important. You've been going over ways that people can know they're on the right track, things they need to understand. And you need to know, a lot of people are just like, how do I know if I'm ready? How do I know if I have enough? How do I know my plan is ready? How do I know that the market's not going to derail the plan? It's like you said, it's the SWAN plan, the SWAN plan, sleep well at night, right? We want to be able to sleep well at night. And that's a key too, isn't it? It's not just about the finances. It's about your mindset going into retirement. And like you said, when you're going to need more money, a lot of people will spend more right away because they're still healthy, right?
Yep. Amen.
Yep.
You have that love affair with retirement. It's, the first year or two, oh, we're going to play unlimited golf. We're going to buy an RV and see the country. We're going to travel around the world. We're going to do whatever. and then one day they wake up and they're sitting in a lazy boy watching reruns of MASH or Big Bang Theory. And they kind of go, what happened? What happened? Um, and that's something where, we've had people that have come to us from other firms. And one thing we love doing, absolutely love, and I'm so excited about it, is we have, and you can certainly call in and ask to be, on invites for it. So we do a quarterly meeting, which is open to everybody. We call it Coffee with Friends, and it's nothing crazy. It's coffee, and we usually get Panera, the nice Danish. My wife loves those cinnamon crunchy things they have, or whatever they are.
I love those too.
Yeah, they're good.
I love them.
But it's called Coffee with Friends because we don't look at people like clients. We look at them as our friends. But more importantly, our clients love inviting other people, and it's a very low key. There's no sales talk. There's nothing. It's just a get together. And we've had to change locations. We keep expanding. This thing started out with 20 or 30 people every quarter, and it's now 100 people. But basically, we talk with some of the top portfolio advisors out there, and we get kind of updates in the market, what they see happening in the marketplace. And so it's a nice, independent review of what's happening in the markets. You get another voice where you're not turning it on CNN or MSNBC or whatever. We talk about some of the things that are going on. We have our deal that we do with Find Your Purpose, which is, everything about retirement that is not financial. You can go to findyourpurpose.com or getyourpurpose.com. I'm sorry, getyourpurpose.com. So we talk about a lot of great things. And for first timers, we actually give them a Coffee with Friends coffee cup, so they have that to remind them, but when you get on that list, and we invite you once a quarter, and it's a great way that people, and it's funny the friendships that have occurred. Our last one we did, clients came and they brought a friend, but the friend they brought, turns out they play cornhole every week with this other couple that came that are client. I didn't know you guys were clients here, and it's just funny. You see the interaction, but we're one big family. That's the name of the game. But people, so I heard this guy on the radio. I'd like to know more about it. Give us a call, 888-888-5601, and just say, hey, I'd like to come to your next Coffee with Clients event. There's no obligation. There's no gotchas. We're not going to, make you stand up in front of the room, do jumping jacks or anything like that. We're going to have fun. But it's a great,
Well, I'm relieved to hear that, because the more you talked about it, the more I'm like, I'd like some Panera. I'd like to hang out and learn some more. So, I'm gonna probably crash one of your Coffee with Friends parties. I want to get one of those mugs. So I'll be attending one, but that's great, as long as you're not going to make me do jumping jacks or get up in front of the room. Actually, me, I'd get up in front of the room and tell some bad
I
jokes.
know Tony, and Tony would be the first one. He'd be like, all right, hey. But I just saw a guy, and I'm ex-military. I'm a Navy submariner, and boy, I've been hearing a lot about that lately. Like, you're just certifiably crazy, Okay, well, yeah, we knew that. Big surprise. But this guy was in the Army. He said, I don't know how the military gets anything done. They don't know how to count. He said we're out there doing calisthenics, and they don't call them jumping jacks. They call them, lateral something. This. He said, but it's 1, 2, 3, 1. He says, what kind of counting system is that? And I thought, well, that's pretty good. You probably don't want to use that kind of math when it comes to finance, But
well, it's the same with music, counting off measures. If you're in 7/8 time, it's crazy. So yes, the military, that's true. It is amazing they get anything done with the math, and math can be confusing if you're trying to relate it to musical notes and measures too. Math is goofy, and that's why I was told there would be no math. That's handled by Bruce. And that's why I'm here. As your co-host, I was told there would be no math and that you would handle all the numbers, which is why you're here, which is why we're such good friends, Bruce.
I love numbers.
Yeah, I know you do. And that's good. But you know what? And I love watching my finances grow. Yeah. Speaking of numbers, well, we do have a few minutes left. So we have talked a lot today. There are going to be gaps in a traditional retirement plan. You want to be working with somebody who's going to be able to fill those gaps. And I think that you mentioned risk. That's a big one that doesn't necessarily get properly addressed. A lot of people talk about addressing risk, and I just see so many people that they'll go to somebody and that person will try to get all their money into safer options. You've got people who think, I'm going to put all my money in CDs in a bank, or I'm going to put all my money in an annuity so I don't have, my principal's going to be protected, or I'm going to put it all under the mattress. But everything has some amount of risk in one way or another, whether it's inflation risk, whether it's opportunity cost, right? Which means, if you have all your money and eggs in one basket, as everybody's heard that phrase, but it really is true when it comes to your retirement funds. You got this lump sum in a 401k. What do you do with it? And a lot of people come to you and they just don't know how to make that transition, do they?
No, it's people, and financial advisors, they salivate over that stake. Oh, $400,000. Oh, and it's kind of like, no, it's, how do we get the maximum value out of it? You
Right.
talk about risk, I haven't told this story in 20 years, well, probably in 10 years on radio, but we had a guy call the office one day and he had a tax question. He said, if I got money from a legal settlement, do I have to pay taxes on it? And I said, well, the short answer is no. Okay, thank you. Bye. Click. And 2 weeks later, called in and kind of asked again, and we tried to get a name, wouldn't give us a name. This went on for about 6 weeks. And finally, he talked to me, and he's like, well, here's the deal. I got this $100,000 settlement, and, he said, I think I want to invest it. I'm like, okay. So, but I don't know what to do. And I'm like, what do you mean? So I agreed to meet him at his house. He put it in mason jars and buried it in the backyard. No joke, really.
He literally did that? Usually that's an analogy for.
Oh no, it gets better. And it had been there for quite a while. So we actually rented a tent so he could dig up his backyard. And we dug it up, and $30,000 of the money had rotted because water got in the jars. And I learned this little piece of trivia that probably I've never had on a radio show before. You'll learn today. So there is a form. If you have a defaced bill, they go by the serial number. So if it's a $100 bill, each serial number is worth $50. You've got to have them intact. If you lose a serial number, you lose half the value. You lose both serial numbers, it doesn't matter how much you have, the bill's useless. And you fill out a sheet of paper for each one of them. So he literally went to the bank with all these little pieces of money and a stack of papers, but about 30 grand of it was destroyed where he didn't have legible serial numbers on the bills. Yeah.
Not bright. Even if he had put it under his mattress and it had remained fine and hadn't rotted,
it just
he would have lost money to inflation.
Well, he thought he thought he was going to get taxed on 100 grand, and he didn't want to pay taxes on it. And I said, it was a legal settlement in this case, and I sent him a copy that I sent it to a PO box, into box holder, PO box, whatever. That's what he gave us, and we sent that to him. That's how we built the relationship. But yeah. So,
that's crazy. That's crazy. I can't believe somebody actually buried his money. Well, hey, we are now out of time, Bruce. So I'm glad we had enough time for that story. That was great. Let our listeners know one more time before we go how they can get a hold of you.
On the great interweb, as my son says, discoverunlock.com. Go there, schedule your time. We'd love to talk to you. Or give us a call, 888-888-5601. Give us a call and schedule your 20-minute discovery call, or feel free to give us a call and just say, hey, I'd like to come to one of your Coffee with Clients events. We'd love to see you. Or the Coffee with Friends events. We'd love to see you. So that's what we have today for Unlock Your Retirement.
All right, Bruce, great show today. We covered a lot. Listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of Unlock Your Retirement with our host, Bruce Smith.